Have you ever looked at a monster and thought, I wonder what that tastes like?
Yeah, boy.
Enter Delicious in Dungeon, the anime that takes those monsters and explains how they taste, with science.
Yes, science!
Dungeon Meshi, or Delicious in Dungeon, is a currently airing anime about a group of adventurers on the quest to save their companion. It's your typical high fantasy fare. There's a dungeon full of mysteries and treasure in the midst of a bustling adventure town, complete with all the tropes and trademarks you'd expect from the fantasy genre. You've got your array of various races, magic, swords, and of course, monsters. This is Laios. He and the gang had a run-in with the Great Red Dragon, where his sister, the party's resident cleric type, got eaten. After narrowly escaping with their lives, they now return to the dungeon on a heroic journey to take down the dragon, and in so doing, resurrect and rescue their friend. The plot is simple, and the show's main focus is actually about survival and food, not adventuring. As the squad delves into the dungeon, they meet Senshi, a dwarf who calls the perilous place home. He teaches them how to cook and prepare the very monsters they fight into meals to sustain them to the journey. Lo and behold, Delicious in Dungeon. The show is entertaining, campy, and has a lot of heart. What really separates it out from the rest of the pack though, is its incredible world building and attention to the details. The dungeon, and especially the monsters, feel alive and have purpose. Most other fantasy shows simply insert their monsters as obstacles to be struck down by the heroes. Spiders, skeletons, tentacles, and zombies all wander a dungeon solely because it makes the place scary and foreboding for a hero to clear and conquer. It doesn't matter how they might interact, or even what they are. They're there because of course they're there. Nothing deeper, and no additional thought or nuance necessary. Delicious in Dungeon takes those monsters and fleshes them out in a way that is both logical and scientific. I have an overpriced degree in biology, so every time the show delves into the anatomy or ecology of the monsters with some pseudo-biological explanation, I'm always like, that's it! That's just like what I learned in school! For a nerd like myself, it's fascinating to explore the inner workings of these fantasy creatures as if they were real studyable organisms. Take the living armor from episode 3. A monster like this is a mainstay in haunted castles and dungeons alike, knights that move on their own without a body inside, standing as silent sentries or patrolling the entrance to somewhere important. Usually, these suits are chalked up to just magic as the device behind their animation. They're possessed or cursed and must be destroyed. End of story. The gang initially think this as well when they face against them. They discover, however, that it isn't simply a spell that controls them, but an intricate network of mollusk-like creatures that are entwined within the lining of the armor, flexing in coordination at the joints to give it motion. Their motivations are explained too. They're protecting the eggs of the next generation, and as such, they guard fiercely and fight for their survival. It's super interesting, believable, and a fresh take on this tired trope of an enemy. Plus, it's made even better when they cook them up and slurp them down like fresh oysters. The show is full of such examples. Seemingly unrelated monsters are given surprisingly lifelike relationships to explore and exploit. Random tentacles that emerge from the wall are rooted in the space behind, lodging themselves within hidden mechanisms and traps, and they have potent stingers with which to paralyze their prey. Giant frogs have formed a symbiosis of sorts with these tentacles, evolving stinger-resistant skin that allows them to traverse freely among the tentacles and use infested areas as easy hunting grounds. Once the party learns of this relationship, they leverage the immunity by donning the skins of the frogs to pass through a tentacle-heavy staircase in the dungeon. Treasure bugs are swarm creatures that camouflage themselves as gold coins or pearls to entice dungeon delvers before attacking. And mimics, Freeren's favorite, are giant crab-like monsters that lie in wait within chests to lure in unsuspecting adventurers. Dungeon Meshi does this really cool thing of linking the life cycles of these two monsters together. You might expect that a mimic would devour treasure bugs, given their difference in size, but it's actually the other way around. Treasure bugs are the predators between the two that infiltrate the chest of a mimic to lay their eggs within. As the eggs hatch and the progeny begin to grow, they feed on the mimic from the inside, ultimately filling up the chest anew with fake shiny coins and pearls just waiting to be discovered by treasure hunters for an attack. These glimpses into the interactions of the dungeon give character to its monsters and breathe a sense of life into them outside of just being stock enemies to be slain. As a show that features cooking, the detailed anatomy of the monsters and the ecology of the dungeon are also highlighted at every turn. Senshi illustrates the various innards of a slime and how to properly prepare them for a gelatinous delicacy. He outlines all of the parts of a kelpie, a water-breathing stallion that drowns its victims, describing the best use for each cut, as well as the flavors and textures to boot. Even the Undine, an amorphous ball of magical water, is explained as a collection of microscopic spirits that inhabit the liquid with finite lifespans and individual motivations. On the ecological side, slimes are shown to be reliant on the droppings of bats to create magical energy for the dungeon itself. In a water-filled cavern, the giant kraken, merfolk, and bladefish are all connected in a delicate food web, just as otters, urchins, and kelp are connected in the seas of our own world. It's these added details that go a long way in making the dungeon and world believable. I can almost taste the kelpie meat myself with the way Senshi describes it, and having the knowledge of the circle of life among the monsters enables not only the party, but also we, the viewers, to envision ways to preserve or disrupt that balance. Every life in the dungeon has meaning. Every kill has a consequence. You just don't get that weight from your standard run-of-the-mill dungeon crawler video game or fantasy anime. It may not be as scientifically entrenched as a show like Dr. Stone or the medical mysteries of Apothecary Diaries, but Delicious in Dungeon does a brilliant job of scratching that itch of making the supernatural appear natural. It reminds me of Interviews with Monster Girls in that way. Different vibes, but a similar sense of discovery by studying fantasy through the lens of biology and logic. If you like fantasy, food, and lighthearted comedy, I highly recommend the watch. And it's a shame because it feels like this show has flown a bit under the radar beneath the overwhelming power of Silly Elf Girl and Miss Pouty Purple. But yeah, that's about it. Let me know what you think and thanks for watching. Thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. Until next time. See ya!